Coming up now is a conversation with Grant Cameron, who I find is one of the most dedicated researchers out there. Grant started as a real nuts and bolts sort of guy, craft, one of the best researchers into Freedom of Information Act documents that the government has covered up. He on his website, he's followed every president's relationship to the UFO phenomena. But in the last couple of years, he realized, well, you know what? It's not about the hardware. It's about the software. It's about who we are. It's about consciousness. So he's also written a book about contact modalities. I think that's coming out. He's written, one of the other books was about musical downloads that from popular songs that all of us hear every day, which are connected to this intelligence, whatever this intelligence is. Anyway, Grant, we'll get into it. Thanks for being here. And
thanks for having me, Alan. That was an eloquent introduction. Thanks.
Yeah, well, you've done so much, and I think it's important that you started with the hardware, because first you have to know that the phenomena is real. It's solid, and then, well, what's really going on here? Which level do you want to talk about today?
I think the importance of experiencers, the importance of who the intelligence is. I've sort of moved, as you pointed out. I saw the UFO up close, so when people say they want to go to Skywatches, I go like, nah, I really don't want to go to Skywatch. I mean, I'm really, I've seen it. I knew it came right at me the second night. I had no interest. I was sort of fell off the edge of the earth. And as you mentioned, I actually had two noetic experiences, one in 2012, one in 2017, where I basically got with absolute certainty that this has got to do with consciousness, because that was what happened in the 1970s. I'd written a book and I'd gone around and I tried to get it published, and nobody could care less. The local publisher said to me, "Mr. Cameron, you may believe in this kind of stuff. Count me among the unbelievers." I went, "What?" So I sort of gave up on sightings. I said, if you have a sighting, it's all very nice and good, and it proves to you that UFOs are there. But I said, all I want to do is I want to find out what was that I saw, because I saw it about 5 times close in 2 years. So I went on this mission, and basically I've just allowed things to happen. So I'm always planning this book, and then another book will come out. So you mentioned the contact modality, which I think is an important book, where I look at all the different contact modalities, and I say basically it's all the same thing. So whether you're channeling, or whether you're doing meditation, or whether you're having an abduction experience, or whatever it is, I say basically I think it's all the same consciousness with a different mask on. And it's this thing that we have to be important to listen to the people that are actually interacting with the intelligence. What we do sometimes is we want to know, like, what does the government know? And I say, what difference does it make? Who cares? Do you care if I know, or if what Alan thinks about it? Who cares if the government knows or they don't know, or what they know or whatever? The question is, what is actually going on? And you've got to talk to people that actually may know. And that's where I say the contactees are important. The people who have been on board the ship, who have actually gotten downloads, who have actually interacted with the intelligence, because 40% of them will say at one point in their experience, they knew the answer to everything in the universe. So I chased them, and I did this contact modality book. And then as you know, I got involved with Mission Rama and at Mount Shasta. And I wrote 2 books. The second one just came out a couple of weeks ago, where I talk about portals, where I'm now in the situation, because as you mentioned, I spent almost my entire 45 years chasing around who knew what about what's going on. So I've dealt with, a lot of people now are very interested in, Lou Elizondo and Hal Puthoff and Kit Green and Eric Davis and stuff. I mean, I wrote my first book about these people in 1990. So I've always been watching these people, and what I learned was that these people knew an awful lot more than you and I. So I always studied, what was the propulsion system, how does it work, and this sort of thing. And in this latest book, it's called Portals and UFOs at Mount Shasta. What I basically say there is, after 45 years of looking at various rumors about what does the government have, what kind of technology, have we cracked the code, do we have the button to turn this thing on, I would now say that if we have any technology, I'll know more tomorrow because I'm about to get a report, but I would say if we have any technology or understanding of what's going on, it has to do with portals. It has nothing to do with nuts and bolts. The idea that we're going to flying saucers and stuff. And this is after 45 years of looking at people like Hal Putoff, who had an investigation. I remember they contacted me about what the Canadians were doing in terms of propulsion systems. And he's just done a recent interview where he says, we had 50 experiments where people would say, okay, this is anti-gravity, this is perpetual motion and stuff. And he said, I've got a graveyard of 50 plus experiments that we've been, and basically saying, no, we don't have anything. Or if you look at Firmage, who spent millions of dollars trying to levitate this box, these gyros off the ground and couldn't get anything. I would say, and I'm just guessing, but this is based upon 45 years of looking at all this kind of stuff. If we have anything, it has to do with portals. We do have some understanding of portal technology, and that's how they're getting here. They're moving in and out we're all in the same space. There's no time, there's no space, this kind of thing, and they're popping in and out. And that's what Kit Green said to Jim Peniston. When Peniston pushed Kit Green, who was at the CIA with the remote viewing program all the way from the 1970s, and who is now running a program for the Department of Defense. I'm pretty sure he's running the program, but he's part of a program that's studying experiencers. And what Peniston said to him was, what the heck what are you doing? What are you trying to talk to me? What do you want my DNA for? Why do you want my brain scan? He said, oh, we're looking at propulsion. And then Peniston said, you are not, get out of here. You're not looking at propulsion. And he said, well, maybe I'm using the wrong word. We're trying to figure out how does the phenomena pop in and pop out just as quickly. So this is what we're looking at. We're looking at a phenomena that I think is all one thing, that we've sort of got everything sort of backwards. And the last thing, and I'll let you ask a question. The last thing I'm working on right now, I was going to do a book called Extraterrestrial or Maybe Not, where I look at what is the phenomena we're dealing with. Because the more I look at it, the more I think it's not going to be extraterrestrial the way we thought it was. I'm going sort of the way of Jacques Vallée. And then I got sort of sidetracked by looking at one of the contact modalities that I did a whole chapter on the book, and that's psychedelics. And I started looking at the whole psychedelic. Now I'm doing a book on psilocybin, which will be my next book. It'll be out in maybe 6 or 7 weeks. And it looks at this psilocybin, and you start looking at these crossovers that you see with UFO experiences. So you see people who are doing like these bungee jumper guys that, will do 20 grams, 30 grams, 40 grams of psilocybin. And what do they say? When you get there, you meet the praying mantises. And I'm going, the praying mantises? You get that with high dose LSD, psilocybin, or if you get the DMT, the spirit molecule. Strassman, who had the experience himself and then decided he was going to study DMT, said there was they call them, Terence McKenna called them the Machine Elves. Well, the Machine Elves, if you look back in my book, Portals and UFOs at Mount Shasta, I talk about the 2 encounters with these Zendra, where 7 people are inside this Zendra with a being in 2014 and then again in 2015. And then they start describing, and I interviewed most of these people, they start describing, well, this big, tall, 10-foot being was standing there, but there was these other beings that were hiding behind the trees, and they were poking out their heads, and they were smiling, and they were like playing hide and go seek. And I said, well, were these grays? And they go, no, they look like little elves. And I'm going, this is the same thing. So you see these crossovers, or talking to Sid Goldberg. Sid Goldberg is doing meditation, and he meets a praying mantis in outer space, a giant praying mantis who said, we put you on Earth for 10,000 years, and then after that short period of time, you will rejoin us. So you start seeing these crossovers of beings in all different modalities, and you start to realize, like, this is way more complex than people think it is. It is just not simply ETs coming here, with some capitalist agenda to steal our toys and rape our women and stuff like that. This is way more complex. It's way less physical, and it's way more spiritual than people think it is. You're muted.
Right. That is a great wrap up of sort of where we're at. I mean, you mentioned Jacques Vallée. One of the famous quotes from Jacques Vallée was, if we find out it's just visitors from another planet, I'd be very disappointed, because there is so much complexity to the phenomenon. There's a whole occult, metaphysical, paranormal aspect, this idea of synchronicities and strange things happening and apports and dimensional doorways. So yes, it's much more complex. And I think that's probably the problem government has with presenting it. How do you present something that you don't even have a handle on? But we'll get into that on the UFO panel tonight. What I want to ask you is, because you said sort of two things. You said it's consciousness, and then there's this thing, portals. Now, what's the relationship between portals and consciousness? Because portals are also a technological phenomena if you have enough energy to create this time-space warping. So how does it connect to the being?
Okay, well, the portal is just getting from here to there. And there's, you know, what I've always heard is about these natural portals. And I didn't really believe it until, you may know, I follow around Ron Pandolfi, who is the guy who may be running the whole show, who's the guy who's, you know, briefs Trump and is with Trump all the time and stuff like that. And when I started watching, they were talking about portals, and I actually got a list, and I had people that would, I tried to get them to come on because his wife was running these go-to meetings on the internet, and they were talking about portals, and I'm thinking, like, what are they talking about? And it didn't make any sense. And then I met, if you know the book American Cosmic by Diane Pasulka,
Yeah.
in that book she talks about Tyler D. So Tyler D, I've actually met him. Like all these high-level people, at some point I've interacted with these people.
That's not his real name, though, Tyler
No,
D.
I could use his real name, but everybody would get upset with
It's
me.
okay. You don't have to.
So anyway, so I had a meeting with him, and Chris Bledsoe was in the meeting. Two very rich business guys were in the meeting, and who else was there? Peter Robbins was there. This is in Pennsylvania at a cabin. And at one point, Tyler D pulls me aside, and he was only there for less than a day. He was there, and then he took off again. And he shows me these photos, and these guys flying through space. Looks like they're in pajamas, and they're flying through space, and it's a painting. And he said, "What do you think of this?" And I'm looking at it, and going, "I don't know." And then he shows me this one with all these balls going into the middle of this painting, of these balls going into the middle of the screen. And he said, "What do you think of that?" And then he shows me this eclipse, these three pictures of an eclipse taking place. And I'm going, like, what's he doing? He's showing me these photos, and then he shows me these pictures of outer space on these screens. And he says, "You know where that is?" And I said, "No, I don't know where that is." And he said, that's the Hughes Aircraft Building outside of LAX. And still I go, like, okay, whatever. And he said, "Well, you know what happened there, eh?" And I said, "What?" He said, "That's where the jump room was." And I go, like, "Can I see those photographs again?" And it was, the whole idea was, why did he show me these photos? He didn't say this is real. He didn't say it wasn't real. He just said, "What do you think of these photographs?" And it was sort of like a prodding me. And I'm going, and I said, "Well, man, as soon as I go to LAX, I'm going to that building," because they turned it into an office building. And the other thing he showed me was a picture of a 56 or 57 Cadillac, Chevy, up on there's two buildings, 999 Sepulveda Avenue is where this is. There's two buildings, a back and a front building, and there's a car parkade between the two. And on the top of this parkade, he has this photo of this 56 Chevy or whatever it is. And he says, "Look in the back seat. You can see there's a postcard in the back seat on this thing." And he said, what it says on there, it's some guy writing to his girlfriend. He said, "I wish I could travel through time and space to be with you." And I'm going, "What? That's what it says?" And I'm thinking, like, why is he telling me? It's almost like he's hinting to me that you got to check this out. And here's this guy who works for NASA, and he's in this building. And Chris Bledsoe said this guy's got the keys to NASA. He's talking to the beings. They're downloading experiences to him. He sold this company for millions of dollars that he got from this download he got. And then the same thing happened with the Ron Pandolfi. They're having these things on portals.
Right.
So I don't really deal with Ron, but I deal with people who are dealing with him. And I said at one point, I said to someone, I said, "Do you think this is actually real? I mean, I can't stand this. It's like rhymes and riddles, and I don't know what's going on here. Do you think I should really stick around, or is this all nonsense? Is this what Ron and his wife are putting out as nonsense?" And he said, "No, I think you should stick around." And that is about to come. I've actually got a tape where Ron says, he's on a cruise ship going through the Panama Canal with his wife and with this guy by the name of John Sillison, who lives in LA, who went to school with Ron in university. And that's the one where Ron gets really upset because I pull it off the internet. They put it up, and then I pull it. And he said, "People always wonder what it's like to go into the next world. The next time John here goes to the desert," and he's referring to this John Sillison guy, "a number of us will go, and we will go into the next world and come back again." And it's like, well, why is this high-level guy saying this on camera? It's the only time he's ever been caught on camera. And then his daughter, this is the clincher, his daughter was about 6 years old at the time, and they had an encounter of 6 or 7, and it was with Joe Firmage. And so they said to Kashmir, they said, "Kashmir, have you got a question for Joe Firmage?" And she said, "Yeah." So she comes on, she says, "How many portals do you have in your house?" And I'm going, this is a 6 or 7 year old kid. She is not making this stuff up. Someone's telling her something. And so I hung on. And what I would think, and this I'm guessing, that they actually have a physical type portal, because they talk about this John Sillison actually going to natural portals and pulling an actuator out of the portal. And this is what they've got. They've got two. I've heard these various stories. And right now it's still a lot of speculation. But this is the whole deal. If portals are real, then everything changes. It's not them coming on spaceships. They're popping in and out. I just had an interview I just did now with a guy by the name of Yossi Ronan out of Israel. And he talks about the beings leaving, these green beings with the big black eyes that are in his 1981 in LA. And the experience takes a couple of minutes. And when they're leaving, they basically hold hands. And he says they start to walk, and they walk faster and faster and faster. And he said all of a sudden they become translucent. And he said he can see through them, and then they become light. And the light gets smaller, 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 till it's a little pinpoint of light, and then boom, it's gone. And this is the idea. This is how they come in and how they go out. And that's the important part of it is, that's what I'm saying. It's not as physical as people think. People think they've got spaceships, they're coming here and stuff like that. And that's why I've interviewed 50 people who have flown the craft, and they say, the way you fly the craft, you put your hand on a panel, you put it on a ball, you put it on the wall, you become one with the craft is alive, the craft does what you say. And I don't think they have that technology. I don't think the government has that kind of technology. And that's why they may be doing the non-disclosure, is how do you say exactly what they said? Yeah, we've got these Nimitz things, they're real, the photographs are real, they're unidentified, and that's all we know. It's pretty hard for you to come up and say, we've got these crafts, we've had them since 1947, and we can't even turn them on, because you need consciousness to turn the thing on.
So let's talk a little. I mean, there's so much there. You have so much information. I love your enthusiasm because, as you said, and I quote you a lot, this is the Super Bowl of all events, understanding this phenomena and the ramifications. So you could talk a little bit about what a jump room is, what a Zendra is, what kind of technology you think we may need for that, but also Ron Pandolfi, you say, is in charge of the Weird Desk. Used to be run by Kit Green. He covers all this stuff. And so the government has this. So give us a kind of overview of what you think the government does know. Are they using it? Did they create a jump room, if you go into that? And will this technology, if you ever, whatever you want to call it, be available to the public at any time soon, or later, sooner or later?
Okay, that's my speculation now, is that they have some understanding that, and when I saw it, I wanted to go back to, and these paintings were there. I actually photographed the paintings myself in this Hughes aircraft building. And then I started to wonder, because I'd had dinner, and he probably had dinner with Andy Basiago, and I had dinner, and I thought he was one of the smartest guys I ever met in my life. I'm going like, you know, because I used to think he was crazy. And
I still think he's crazy, Grant. Come on.
Come on. No, I had dinner with him, and I had breakfast with him, and I thought like he'd be like, you know, slobbering and, you know, like
nice guy. Like, no, nice guy, but a little. Yeah. So,
but that's the whole thing. Then I started to wonder, like, maybe he's actually telling the truth. Maybe this is actually true, that they do have this technology. Because you get a 6-year-old kid, you can say, well, whatever you want about, you know, people, grown-up people, but when you get a 6-year-old kid, I'm going, she ain't making this stuff up. And that's where I got this idea, because people want to go to the nuts and bolts thing. So we get, and that's why I say, I actually asked Hal Put Up about this. I thought it was very bizarre. So we get a piece of metal, and we got a piece of metal, and it's layered, and it's, you know, all this kind of stuff. And we think that if we get this piece of metal, we're going to be able to back engineer a flying saucer. And I'm going, like, they came across the galaxy. There's not pieces falling off the flying saucer. To me, this is like a port stuff. And there's an actual documentary being done. I was just at the site that for the famous 1967 Steve Michalak case, if you remember, Falcon Lake, Canada, that was investigated by Blue Book, and he has this UFO lands beside him. He's prospecting, and he actually gets burned by this thing. And they go and they do an investigation to the site, and it's this huge rock in the middle of nowhere in this forest, and they find metal in this rock. There's metal at Rendlesham Forest. There's metal all over the place. And so I start to look at it different, that this metal is being dropped, and you can look at all the metal you want. You can look at all the photographs you want, and you're not going to learn anything until you start to talk to people who are interacting with the phenomena and who have some idea of what actually might be going on. Because 40% of all experiencers say they know they knew the answer to everything in the universe, and we just say, well, it's anecdotal. We can't really believe these people. We need something that's hardware and stuff. And that's where you get into Ron Pandolfi stating that all the to the stars stuff, all the stuff is techno scam. And this is the idea that you may believe that you're going to develop this stuff, that you may believe that this stuff will get you. It's like you think you got a cure to cancer. We're on the very verge. And so you have this threat thing. Oh, there may be a threat. We need money. We need to do back engineering and this sort of stuff. The technology that I've seen indicates that it is so far removed from anything we've got in terms of, you'll hear descriptions of people, Chris Bledsoe, Terry Lovelace. They'll say, there's this little craft and it's like, you know, the size of a Volkswagen. And they go inside the craft and it's the size of a football field inside. And then they look outside and the craft's small, they go inside. And then you get the crossovers. You get people who've had near-death, the beings have taken them into the spirit world. Ron Johnson is a friend of mine. They took him in the spirit world. He's talking to his dead mothers leading him around the spirit world. He goes into a building in the spirit world. She said, Ron, when you die, you're going to have a room in this building here. He says, I go into the building and it's 10 times the size in the building as it is outside the building. And then you go like, wow, I mean, there's no doubt that this is the same story. And so the question is the person is it an abduction experience or is it a out-of-body experience? And when the more you look at it, the more you realize this is so far advanced. Or Ron Johnson says, when you're flying the craft, he said, they asked him, what would you like to see? He said, I'd like to see the Milky Way from a distance. So he said, okay, it's going to be very violent for 1 second, very violent G-force for 1 second. He said, in 1 second, the front of the window opened up, the metal became translucent, and he was outside the Milky Way looking back at the Milky Way in 1 second. So anybody who thinks we've got that technology, we don't. We have some understanding of what they're doing, but you're not going to put it out if you don't have any understanding. And that's why they're trying to raise the money in the white world, the To the Stars people and the Hell Put Off and stuff, because they're trying to get the money. But Hell will say right away that they don't have anything. Or Eric Davis said, we shut the program down in 1989. The stuff is not at Area 51 because we couldn't get anywhere with it. And that may be the actual truth, is all they know is, yeah, we've got these things flying around and we can't, even though they have bodies and they have crafts, they still can't turn the craft on. They still don't know where these things are from. It is so far removed from what we actually think. And people think we're on the very verge and we're going to have jets and cars and we're going to be flying around and stuff like that. I think we're like 1,000 years away from understanding what this is about, because it's so advanced and it has all to do with consciousness.
But you also said, hey, there's a jump room. So is the government doing what Andrew Basagio says, Mars? I mean, I doubt it, but is there a jump room or is there not?
Well, that's the whole thing. I would have started and said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I would have said, no way. But when this guy shows me these photos, and he doesn't say, believe this, don't believe this, whatever. Why is this high-level guy that basically everybody bows down to? Or Kit Green says, if you take the first couple chapters off Pasulka's book, the last couple chapters off Pasulka's book, that's what I think is going on. You have this thing where this extremely high-level guy is showing me these photographs and saying, what do you think? Why is he showing me these photographs? If this is all nonsense, why is he showing me these photographs? And I started to wonder, I was thinking, like, maybe there's something to this. And then when I saw Ron say, number of people in this room will go into the next world and come back again, and he says it on camera, and he gets very upset when he hears I've got the tape. He said, that Cameron's a thief. And it's like, well, you put it up on YouTube, and it was something, and even his friends, when I showed it to his friends, they went, wow, they just couldn't believe Ron had said that. And so the thing is that if that's right, and I think it was Ron is saying, it's not the nuts and bolts stuff. That's all techno scam. They're not getting anywhere. You're going to spin your wheels. You're not going to get anywhere if you're going to use nuts and bolts. And he starts talking about this portal thing, which indicates it may be not nuts and bolts. It may have more to do with consciousness, and that they may have developed some sort of ability. Now, it's not they have a total ability, but when you hear a 6-year-old kid, then I start thinking, they have got something. I don't know what it is. And that's what I'm working on right now, is to find out and to get them to confirm what they actually have.
You know, when you're talking, what's coming to me, and you lay this out in your theory of wow, which is a essay Grant did for a book that's coming out called Making Contact. It was a collection of essays, and I was happy Grant can contribute, that there's an evolution to, let's start with UFOs. In the 1890s, they looked like, you know, what you would think a craft would look like in the 1890s. And we get the that 1920s, 30s, that Buck Rogers look, and there's an evolution to the craft itself, and then we get these triangular ships. Well, first we get the lights around with the Betty and Barney Hill in the 60s, and then in the 90s we get these triangular formations, but they're not evolving their technology. So what I get from what you're saying is they're going to start to do away with ships altogether. The ships is just to let us know that they're out there, but it's really the portal science that's going to replace this contact experience. That's what I get. So it's part of the evolution you lay out in that essay, and they present us with the technology that's on the level that we can connect with culturally in our civilization at the time. Yeah. So they look like wooden ships.
Like we have to realize that we are part of the we're in this Darwinian science religious idea that everything is separate, everything is random. It's just a random meaningless universe where biological robots in it. And when you start to look, the more you look at, I think, at the experiencer messages, the more you see that they are connected. Even Bud Hopkins said, or not Bud Hopkins, but John Mack said to Bud Hopkins, there was this debate that took place, you've probably seen it, in Boston, where he says to Bud, he says, you know, Bud, it's really strange. He says, you know, I'm the psychiatrist here. You think I'd be getting all the real weird bad ones? And he said, I'm getting all the spiritual seeking ones, and you're getting all the bad ones. And maybe that has more to do with you and I and how we operate. And that's what you've got to realize, is that we are part of the equation. So if you see something, it may be that they're projecting. That's what this Ronin guy told me, that they told him, is we don't have bodies. We don't come here with bodies. We come here and we appear as whatever you want us to appear as. And that we can go back into this other world. So they can come in and become physical, go back into their world, but it's this idea that we're moving into these dimensions. Or even if you get into quantum physics, I more and more I quote the whole thing where John Wheeler said, there is no out there out there. That's the Stephen Greer, where Stephen Greer quotes, you think you are a puny figure when the universe is within you. It's this whole idea, there may not be any out there. It may all be within you, as the Eastern mystics have been saying for many years. And that changes everything. If you start to realize that we're in this idea of separation and planets and stuff like that, and you start to get this idea that it may be if you're having a out-of-body experience, you're going within yourself. You're not going out of your body. If you're having an abduction experience, you may be going within yourself, because that was the big controversy with the Wilson leak. People that said at the very end, there are no abductions. And everybody said, oh, come on, this is absolute nonsense. So I went back, and that was written to NIDS. So I went back and I looked at the board members for NIDS who had access to that document. I looked at Edgar Mitchell. What does Edgar Mitchell say? Nope, no abductions. If there are, they're military. And then I looked at Kit Green. Kit Green says no abductions ever. And I started looking at all these different people, and there's nobody really supporting it. And the question is not that there's no event. There is an abduction event. The question is what's actually going on in the event. Is it a physical where you're being taken? Is it true that you can fly through, you can take you through walls? Is it true that there's nuts and bolts that you can, the craft is 100 times the size inside as it is outside? Or the idea of the crystal, where people are shown the crystal and you're shown past lives, where the aliens have the crystal. So I'm saying you're part of the equation. People always want to separate it and say it's them and there's us and this is nuts and bolts and stuff. And I've done it for 45 years. And the way it's leading me is to say, no, you are a big part of this. And it may be there is no out there. It is all an experience that's happening in your head. That is a possibility.
Or it may be both. It's not like either or, because Kit Green also examined people for markers to see if they were abducted, right? Didn't they do that? And there also are crafts. So there's maybe levels where on some level, yes, it's just portal technology and there's no craft. And yes, there may be craft. I mean, it's so complex, the phenomena. So it doesn't have to be. Yeah,
well, it's like in a port. Okay, so let me give you one example. Do you have the one with the group in the 1990s that was, like, their name is escaping me here, the big group that did the experiments. They do the one where they get the report of a 39 newspaper, 1941 newspaper,
Right.
that reports, just drops down, and it's pristine. So newspaper over a couple of years will yellow, and it was completely pristine. Within a couple of weeks, it was yellow again. And so the whole thing is this actually crafts that are coming in and crashing? Or if you look at Diane Pasulka's book, what do they call the field? And the field that they were in when they were picking up this metal was actually gotten from my friend here in Winnipeg, who showed Tyler D where the field was. And he went there, and then he takes Nolan, and he takes Pasulka out there and blindfolds them and all this kind of stuff. And what do they call it? They call it the gifting field. So that holds a whole new thing. Is this actually crashes, or is this like an report? Are they intentionally crashing this material? Do they fly across the galaxy all the way across, get through all this time and space, and then pieces start falling off the craft and they start crashing? That's the big skeptic argument. And that's the whole thing. You start looking at it like, maybe, yeah, they can come in, they can become physical, they can go back into their world, and they're only physical for a period of time, and they can go back and forth. We just think that we're stuck in the physical world and we can't move. We can't do the same thing they're doing. So yeah, if they come in and they crash when they're in the physical environment, yeah, then there will be a physical element. Or if they drop a ports, because where are our ports coming from? It's not like, well, it's nuts and bolts. It's coming from the spirit world. It's coming from the UFO world. People are saying, I have the famous one, the Addie photographs. You've ever seen it? So Addie was a girl who was, there was a group of a seance group in England, and they dealt with this Addie girl who's claimed to be about 12 years old. She lived in the house that they were doing the seance or whatever. And the one thing, and it's actually on tape, they actually get this on tape, where she drops this photograph of herself in a classroom. And she's in the top right-hand corner, and she looks exactly like one of the girls in the seance when she was younger. Wow. So you look at this photograph. I spent weeks looking at this photograph, trying to find that classroom. And because she was lived in that house, this is 1910 photograph. And you see the photograph, it has these kids, but the back wall is all weird. It starts with full bricks, partial bricks, and the other side has no bricks. It's like they've photoshopped the back of the photo. It's just really weird. And I could not find the photograph. And the school had to be within a mile of her, because it's 1910. There's no school buses. They're not going anywhere else. They've got to be close to her. Could not find it. So the thing is, with this report photograph that appears, is that a physical world thing, or is that created and brought in from the spirit world? And we always get linked in this thing, well, if it's physical, then it's physical world. And we know from reports that this stuff can come out, it can be manifested. Kai Muga can make it come out his hands, it comes out of his eyeballs, out of his ears. This is this weird angle where all these contact modalities cross over, that you see the same phenomena happening. Reports happens in psychics, it happens in mediums, it happens in UFO experiences. You see these parallels across, and you start to realize it's all the same thing.
Right. You're just opening up a huge, I wouldn't call it a can of worms, but a huge complex universe that we're really a part of. And we've been so brainwashed and conditioned to see a world through this narrow scope. And I think what you're saying is the ETs, whatever you want to call these beings, is opening us up to the phenomena about the complexity of being, of being conscious, aware entities. And there is no simple answer, and the government's been hiding, religion's been hiding it from us, everyone, science. So we're here to start to take responsibility for a bigger reality that we're a part of. And you're just kicking open the door to those possibilities, Grant. We should wrap it up in about 5 minutes, but and we're going to pick this up later in the day at 5:20 when we do the panel. But from everything you've said, where should people plug into the phenomena? If there's so many people listening that want to have experiences or want to connect in, and you've looked at a huge range of possibilities. So what would you leave people with now as far as opening up to this intelligence phenomena and in a way having it change their lives? Because that's what it's really for, I think, to show this more to us as human beings.
Well, I would give a warning not to get stuck on one track, because as you know, I worked as a bartender at the Faculty Club Lounge at the university for a number of years. So I got to know professors and realized that people can get stuck down one little angle of one field, one specific, and they can't do anything else. And that's the problem. We have to stay out of one track. We have to realize that there's all this stuff happening around. As to aliens, I mean, I'd hate to say it, but people say, "Oh, I want to see an alien." And we have these CE5s. We had some here, and I said to the guy who's doing the CE5s, he has all this $100,000 of equipment or whatever, and I said, "You want to see an alien? Do DMT 3 times. You're going to see an alien." Well, I don't do that. It's like, oh, okay, we want the alien to come to us. We're going to do a little meditation, and the aliens, they're busy doing stuff, and it's like, drop what you're doing and fly by. And I think we get into this problem that a lot of what we're doing in the UFO community is it's just entertainment. It's like in the late 19th and 20th centuries, people went to mediumship things. They went to, hear dead people or whatever, rich people. And what we're doing now is we can't turn it into entertainment, and that we need the aliens to show it to us because we're interested, we're whatever. If you want to find out, there are many ways, but you've got to deal with the people who are having the experience and say, how did you do it? And go from there. We're ignoring the people who are actually interacting with the phenomena big time because we're so into reproducibility, and that's just anecdotal. It's all anecdotal. It's all belief systems. And if we're using the rational analytical brain, we're saying, what I see is, I want, rational analytical. And I say if the rational analytical brain had its way, we'd still be in 1492 on a flat earth with the sun going around in the middle of a universe by ourselves. The only time things will change is when you bring new information in. Einstein said you cannot solve a problem using the same information that you used to create the problem. You have to get new information and bring it into the equation. And the new information is coming from experiencers. You can look at all the sightings you want and all that kind of stuff. You've got to talk to the people to get new information and then be open about it and play it like a chess game. Just don't get hung up. And that's what I've tried to do, is look across all these different modalities, and you start seeing these patterns, and you realize that there is an answer that you can get, but it's
not the one you expect, right? It's not. But Grant, your research is so valuable, and you just opened up a huge portal, I would say, to what we think is out there. And really, you're saying we have no idea, but we have to go with letting go of the old models, because that's the only way we're going to understand what's going on. I'd love to do a whole show with you about Zendras and portals and doorways to other dimensions. So we can do that. Sorry it's been such a short time here, but I think this has expanded the conversation that we're going to have the rest of the day, and we'll pick this up tonight, okay? This evening around 5:20 on the panel. And how can people?
I'm sure Hertak will have some input on portals, because there's a guy. I mean, that's the example. When Hertak gets taken for a couple of days and they give him a couple of books and a download, you better start listening to the guy. And people just say, no, I don't want to listen. Just give me some pictures, give me some entertainment. You got to listen to the people who have been there and talk to the intelligence. Right.
And someone like J.J. Hertak, who was taken up to these other realms for 3 days and met these high beings, his life changes and his mission changes, and he's here to serve the greater mind with multidimensional information. So we're going to get into that. And that's really where, from what you're saying, the UFO studies are going to this multidimensional awareness. And that's what all the experiences said that last night on the experiencers panel. So how can people find you and get in contact with you and know more about you?
White House UFO is my YouTube channel where I post most of all my interviews, and Presidential UFO Facebook is where I post daily stuff.
Great, Grant. I'm so happy you're really at the cutting edge, because you're at the forefront. A lot of people are trying to look into hardware and cases, but you're taking it somewhere new. And this is where I think we all need to go. And I think this is what Neil has put together here in the last 5 days, is where are we going from here? Let's not look at where we've been. Let's look at where we're going. So thanks so much.
Sure. The closing point is that in 75, I saw it and I said, somebody's got to know what's going on. I'm now 66. I'm running out of time, and I'm desperate to find an answer. So that's where it's at.
Well, you're closer than you've ever been, but of course it's like the horizon. It keeps moving, right?
Yeah, you got it. Thanks, Alan.
Thanks. I'll talk to you later. Thanks for being here.